Before we get started, please like and subscribe. Let me know where you're watching from, and you can support the channel by clicking thanks or joining. I never believed that photographs could lie until the first time I saw the child. I live alone in a small house on the edge of a quiet American town where nothing ever seems to happen. The kind of place where neighbors wave politely but never ask questions, and where nights stretch long and empty. I moved there after my divorce, looking for silence and distance from people. Photography was my escape. Every evening after work, I would take my camera and walk through the house, capturing small moments, light on the wall, dust in the air, the shadow of my own body stretching across the floor. I only photographed when I was alone. That rule mattered to me. It was the one thing that made the house feel like it belonged only to me. The first photo that changed everything was taken on a Sunday night. I remember because the air felt heavier than usual and the house was unnaturally quiet. I stood in the hallway and pointed my camera toward the living room. The shutter clicked once, nothing unusual, just an empty couch and the faint glow of a lamp. I did not review the image until later, when I finally sat on my bed and scrolled through the photos. My fingers froze. There was a child standing in the living room. The boy looked about 7 or 8 years old. He wore an old-fashioned shirt with buttons too large for his chest and pants that hung stiffly around his legs. His hair was dark and neatly parted, as if someone had taken time to comb it. He was not smiling. He was staring directly into the lens. At first I laughed. I told myself it was a trick of light or motion blur. My mind reached desperately for logic. I zoomed in. The image sharpened. The boy remained. I checked the metadata. The timestamp matched the exact second I took the photo. No edits, no overlays. I stood up and searched the house room by room. Every door was locked. Every window was sealed. There was no sign that anyone had entered. I live miles away from the nearest school, and there are no children in my neighborhood. No families, no playgrounds, no footsteps outside. That night I barely slept. The next day I convinced myself it was a one-time anomaly, a glitch, something explainable by software or sensor error. I work in IT. I trust systems more than feelings, so I decided to recreate the conditions. That evening I stood in the same hallway and took another photo. The boy was closer. He stood halfway between the couch and the hallway. His posture was stiff and unnatural, like a doll placed upright. His eyes were darker this time, deeper, as if they absorbed the light around them. My heart began to race. I checked the house again. Nothing. On the third night, I did not want to take a photo, but something in me needed confirmation. I raised the camera with shaking hands. The boy stood at the end of the hallway, closer to my bedroom. I noticed new details then. His skin was pale, almost gray. His feet were bare and left no shadows. When I zoomed into his face, I realized he had no reflection in the framed mirror on the wall beside him. That was the moment fear replaced doubt. I stopped taking photos after that. I packed the camera into a drawer and told myself the problem would end if I ignored it. For several days, nothing happened. The house felt normal again. Quiet, safe, until the envelope arrived. It was waiting in my mailbox when I returned from work one evening. No stamp, No return address, just my name written in thin, careful handwriting. Inside was an invitation. It was printed on thick, yellowed paper as if it had been stored for decades. The letters were formal and precise. It invited me to a gathering, a birthday celebration. The date stopped my breath. The invitation was dated 1 year in the past. I checked the calendar again and again, thinking I had misread it. But the date did not change. The location listed was my address, my house. At the bottom of the page was a simple line. You attended. You took photographs. You were alone. My hands trembled as I noticed something else. The name of the guest of honor. It was the same name written on the back of the printed photograph I had not noticed until that moment. A name that belonged to the child in the photos. I dropped the invitation onto the floor and backed away as if it could move on its own. That night I dreamed of flashbulbs and footsteps in the hallway. I dreamed of a child standing just out of sight, waiting for the camera to turn back on. When I woke up, the drawer where I had locked my camera was open. The camera was gone. And on my bedroom door at eye level for a child was a faint, greasy handprint. I did not call the police about the missing camera. I know how that sounds. But there was nothing I could say that would not make me sound unstable. No forced entry, no broken locks, just a camera gone and a handprint that faded by morning like it had never been there at all. I spent the next day trying to convince myself that exhaustion had distorted my memory. I scrubbed the door until my knuckles hurt, even though the mark was already gone. By afternoon, the house looked normal again. Too normal, as if it were pretending. That night I slept with the lights on. Sometime after midnight, I woke to the sound of a soft click. It was the unmistakable sound of a camera shutter. I held my breath and listened. The house was silent except for my own heartbeat. I told myself it had come from outside or from a passing car, but deep down I knew that sound. Heard it thousands of times. The camera was inside the house. I did not leave my bed until morning. When daylight finally came, I searched every room. The camera was not where I had left it, but it was not gone either. It sat on the kitchen table, carefully placed, as if someone wanted me to see it. The lens cap was off. The battery was warm. Someone had used it. My hands shook as I turned it on. There was a new photo. The image showed my bedroom door taken from inside my own room. I recognized the angle immediately. The photograph had been taken from the foot of my bed. I zoomed in slowly. The door was open. Behind it, in the darkness of the hallway, stood the child. He was closer than ever before. I could see the texture of his skin, the faint cracks around his lips, the veins beneath his pale surface. His eyes were wide now, not empty but focused, watching me. I dropped the camera and stumbled backward. I checked the timestamp. 3:12 in the morning. I had been asleep. That was when I noticed something else. The reflection. This time the mirror on the wall did show him, but it also showed something behind him. Something taller, something that did not have a clear shape. Only a distortion in the air, as if reality itself bent around it. I could not see its face, but I could feel it pressing forward through the photograph. I turned the camera off. and shoved it into a drawer again, but I knew it no longer mattered. The photos were not memories, they were invitations. That afternoon I drove to the town library searching for anything that could explain what was happening. Old newspapers, archived obituaries, property records. The house had been built in the 1970s and had changed owners several times. Nothing unusual, no deaths listed, no crimes, until I searched the school records. One name stopped me cold, the same name printed on the invitation. The child had existed. He had been enrolled in the local elementary school for exactly 1 year. Then his record ended. No transfer, no graduation, just absence. I asked the librarian about it. She hesitated before answering. Her smile faded when I said the name out loud. She told me people used to whisper about a birthday party, a party no one remembers attending. Parents claimed their children had been invited, balloons had been bought, gifts wrapped. Then on the day of the party something happened. A storm, a power outage. The details changed depending on who you asked, but everyone agreed on one thing. No child ever came home with photos from that day. I drove back to my house as the sun began to set. On my front porch was another envelope. This one was addressed to the child. Inside was a note written in the same careful handwriting. It said simply, "You are late." That night, the camera turned on by itself. The flash went off again and again down the hallway outside my bedroom. Each burst of light revealed movement, shadows shifting closer, footsteps that did not make sound. I hid under the covers like a terrified child and waited for morning. When the noise finally stopped, I forced myself to look. The hallway walls were covered with photographs, hundreds of them. Every image showed the same thing, me asleep. And in every photo, the child stood closer. In the final image, he sat on the edge of my bed, smiling, holding an invitation with my name crossed out, and his written beneath it. I did not sleep at all after seeing the photographs on the walls. I sat on the floor of my bedroom until sunrise, staring at the empty space where the child had been sitting in the final image. When the light finally pushed its way through the curtains, the photos were gone. Every wall was bare. No tape marks, no nail holes, nothing. The camera lay on the floor beside my bed. It was turned off. That scared me more than anything else. I did not go to work that day. I unplugged every electronic device in the house and opened every curtain. I needed light. I needed witnesses, even if they were only passing cars outside. Around noon, someone knocked on my door. 3 slow knocks. I froze. No one ever comes to my house unannounced. When I finally opened the door, a woman stood on the porch. She was older than me, maybe in her late 60s, with tired eyes and hands that shook slightly. She held a small cardboard box against her chest. She said my name. I had never seen her before. She introduced herself as Margaret and asked if I had recently found an invitation. My stomach dropped. I asked how she knew where I lived. She looked past me into the house as if she were afraid to step inside. She told me she had been waiting for someone to answer the door for years. I invited her in. She refused. Instead, she opened the box and showed me what was inside. Photographs, old ones, printed on thick paper, the edges yellowed with age. Every image showed the same birthday party. Balloons, a cake, streamers, a group of children standing in my living room. My living room. The furniture was different, but the walls were the same. The hallway was the same. The angle of the photos was the same. And in every picture stood the child, always at the center. Margaret pointed to herself in one photo. She was younger, smiling, standing near the doorway. She told me the boy had been her son. His birthday party had been held at my house long before I lived there. She said parents dropped off their children and were told to come back later. When they returned, the house was empty. No children, no decorations, no cake. The police were called. Search parties formed. Nothing was ever found. Margaret said something else then. Every parent swore they had taken pictures of the party, but every photo showed only one child, her son. The others had been erased. She asked me if I had taken pictures while alone. I could not answer. Her face crumpled when she saw the truth on mine. She told me the invitation was not meant for me. It was meant for the camera. The device had captured something it should not have, something that learned how to exist by being seen. She said the child does not age because time does not touch photographs. He moves closer each time someone looks at him, each time someone accepts the invitation. Margaret begged me to destroy the camera. She warned me that if the child ever made it out of the photograph completely, someone else would take his place. I asked her why she had waited so long to come. She said she had been waiting for the house to choose someone again. As she turned to leave, she said one last thing. The party never ended. That night, the power went out. The house fell into complete darkness. In the silence, I heard the sound of paper sliding across the floor. I found another invitation pushed under my bedroom door. This one had no date, no name, just a single line. It is time to step out of the picture. The camera clicked from somewhere behind me. I did not turn around. I did not need to. I could feel a small hand resting on the edge of my bed, and it was warm. I stayed completely still after feeling the hand on my bed. I counted my breaths and waited for the weight to disappear. It did not. The hand pressed slightly into the mattress as if testing whether I was real. I closed my eyes and pretended to sleep. Fear had reduced my thoughts to one instinct: do not look. The mattress dipped again. A whisper brushed against my ear. It sounded like a child practicing how to speak. I do not remember when the pressure vanished, but when I finally dared to open my eyes, the room was empty. Morning light crept through the window and birds chirped outside as if nothing had happened. The invitation lay on the floor beside my bed. It was warm. I did not touch the camera that day. I wrapped it in towels and locked it in the trunk of my car, hoping distance might weaken whatever connection it had created. Then I drove. I did not know where I was going, only that I needed to put miles between myself and the house. By nightfall, I reached a motel off the highway, the kind with flickering lights and stained carpets that smell of old smoke. I checked in under my real name. I was too tired to lie. That night, I dreamed of photographs being torn apart one by one. I woke to the sound of a camera shutter. The camera sat on the nightstand beside my bed, still wrapped, still locked. I screamed. The motel clerk banged on my door, threatening to call the police. When I opened it, the camera was gone. He searched the room and found nothing unusual. I left immediately. I drove until my hands ached and my eyes burned. At dawn, I pulled into a rest stop and fell asleep in the car. When I woke up, my phone buzzed with a notification. An email, no sender. Attached was a photograph. It showed me asleep in the driver's seat, taken from outside the car. The child sat in the back seat behind me. I drove back to the house. I knew then that running only brought him closer. When I returned, the front door was unlocked. Inside, the house smelled different, stale, as if no one had breathed there for a long time. The hallway felt narrower. The walls seemed closer together. In the living room stood a small table. On it sat a cake. 7 candles, all burned down. Above it hung a banner, "Happy Birthday." I heard laughter echo softly from the hallway, children's voices overlapping, whispering my name. I followed the sound to the bedroom. The mirror was covered with photographs taped edge to edge. Each photo showed a moment from my life, not memories. Observations. Me eating alone, me sleeping, me crying in the shower. In the center was a new image. The child standing beside me, both of us looking at the camera, his hand on my shoulder. I felt cold fingers wrap around my wrist. This time I looked. He stood inches from me, no longer flat, no longer silent. His smile was wide and wrong. He told me he was tired of being alone in the pictures. He said birthdays are meant to be shared. Behind him, the hallway filled with shadows. Other children, faded, waiting. The camera lay on the bed lens pointed toward us. The invitation slid from the photograph frame onto the floor. My name was gone. His was crossed out. Below it, a new name appeared. Mine. The camera clicked and the room went white. I woke up on the bedroom floor with my ears ringing and my mouth tasting like metal. For several seconds, I could not remember where I was. The white flash still burned behind my eyes. When my vision finally cleared, I was alone. The house was silent again. No laughter, no whispers, no footsteps. The cake was gone. The photographs were gone. The banner was gone. Only the camera remained. It lay on the bed exactly where it had been before the flash, perfectly centered. Waiting, I stood slowly, afraid that sudden movement might summon him back. My body felt wrong, as if gravity had changed slightly and I had not adjusted yet. When I looked at my hands, they seemed thinner. The skin stretched tighter than it should. I went to the bathroom mirror. For a moment, my reflection looked normal. Then it blinked out of sync. I stepped back. The reflection lagged behind my movements by a fraction of a second. When I raised my hand, my reflection followed just a little too late. When I smiled in disbelief, my reflection smiled wider than I did. I turned away. I knew what it meant. I had been photographed. I searched the house for any sign of the child. Every room was empty, but something felt occupied, like a space recently vacated but still warm. I could sense eyes on me from angles I could not see. The camera screen lit up up by itself. There was a new image. It showed me standing in front of the bathroom mirror, but the reflection was not mine. The child stood where my reflection should have been, his hands pressed flat against the glass as if trapped on the other side. His mouth moved silently, forming words I could not hear. I dropped the camera and backed away. That was when the knocking began. 3 slow knocks. At the front door, I did not answer. The knocking moved. It came from the walls, from the ceiling, from inside the floor beneath my feet. Each knock echoed like a shutter closing. I ran outside. The sky was overcast and the neighborhood looked wrong. Houses leaned slightly inward as if listening. Windows reflected light at impossible angles. Across the street, a family stood frozen beside their car. They were staring at me. No, at something behind me. I turned. The child stood on my front porch, fully solid, fully real. He waved. Then he stepped forward and passed through the front door as if it were nothing more than a photograph itself. The family across the street vanished. The street emptied. I was alone again. Inside the house, the camera began to print photographs, one after another. They slid out onto the floor. Each image showed a moment that had not happened yet. Me answering the door, me sitting at the table, me smiling at a cake, me holding the camera. In the final photograph, I was standing where the child had once stood, flat, still, preserved. I understood then. The camera did not steal people. It replaced them. Someone had to be in the picture. Someone had to host the party. The child was never meant to leave. He was meant to be traded. I tried to destroy the camera. I smashed it against the wall. I drowned it in the sink. I set it on fire in the backyard. It did not change. The lens remained clear. The screen remained dark. At sunset, another invitation appeared in my hand. I did not remember picking it up. It was addressed to a new name, not mine. I felt a moment of hope. Then I saw my name printed below as the sender. Host. The camera lifted itself from the ashes. The lens turned toward me. Behind it, I saw the hallway filling again with faded children. Waiting, I felt myself growing lighter, flatter. The world lost depth. As the shutter closed, I realized the truth. The house does not choose the photographer. The camera does, and it had already learned my face. I do not know how long I stayed conscious after the shutter closed. Time no longer moved the way it used to. Minutes stretched thin and then collapsed without warning. When I opened my eyes, I was standing in my living room, but it did not feel like standing. It felt like being held upright by something that no longer needed my muscles. The house was silent yet full. The air pressed against me from every direction, as if the walls were closer than they had ever been. When I tried to take a step forward, my foot moved, but the floor did not respond. There was no sound, no weight. I looked down and saw my shadow lag behind me just like my reflection had. I was becoming incomplete. The camera sat on the coffee table. It was facing me. I did not remember placing it there. The screen turned on by itself. I saw the child again, but this time he was not in the house. He was standing inside the photograph, flat, still. His eyes followed me as I moved. He smiled softly as if relieved. He had learned. The trade was complete. I felt something tighten around my chest, not pain, but pressure, as if the world were compressing me into a thinner shape. When I raised my hands, they felt lighter, almost hollow. I could see the living room through my fingers, like I was made of glass. A sound drifted through the house. Music, a distant birthday song, played slowly and out of tune. I followed it even though I knew I should not. Each step felt less real than the last. The hallway stretched longer than it should have, and the doors along it were slightly open, revealing darkness inside. Inside each room were photographs, hundreds of them. They hung in the air without frames, suspended like memories that refused to settle. Each image showed me at different moments of my life, but I was always alone, always looking toward the camera. In none of them was I smiling. I reached for one. My hand passed through it, but the image rippled like water. When I pulled back, my fingers were flatter than before. The music grew louder. In the dining room, the table was set. Plates, cups, a cake in the center. 8 candles this time, all unlit. Around the table sat children, faded, their faces blurred as if unfinished. They watched me with empty patience. At the head of the table was an empty chair. Waiting, I understood what was expected. I sat. The moment I did, the room snapped into focus. The children became clearer. So did I. The camera appeared on the table, pointed directly at my face. A voice spoke from everywhere at once. Say cheese. I tried to stand, but my body no longer obeyed me. My joints felt fixed like a pose held too long. I realized with horror that the longer I stayed still, the easier it became. The child in the photograph leaned closer to the lens. He waved at me from inside the frame. The shutter clicked. The candles lit themselves. Warmth spread across the room, and with it, a terrible clarity. I was no longer being taken. I was being placed. The song restarted louder this time. Happy birthday to you. As the words filled the room, I felt the last depth drain from my body. The edges of the world sharpened, while I flattened into a single angle. The camera lowered. The children smiled. Somewhere far away, a door opened. A new photographer stepped inside the house, and I understood the final rule. The picture never stays empty for long. I do not breathe anymore. I remember breathing. I remember the weight of air filling my lungs, and the small relief that came with each exhale. Now there is only the memory of it. The habit remains, but the need is gone. I exist in a state between moments, held still like a pose that never ends. I am inside the photograph. At first there was darkness, then light burned into shape. Colors flattened, depth vanished, everything became surface. I am standing in the living room facing the camera, exactly as the shutter captured me. I cannot turn my head. I cannot close my eyes. I can only see what the lens allows. Time passes differently here. I know this because the world outside the frame changes. Dust gathers on furniture and disappears again. Light shifts through the windows in slow, unnatural jumps. Sometimes the house is empty. Sometimes someone new walks through the front door. The photographer, they always arrive alone. alone. At first, they do not notice me. I am just part of the room, another decoration, another shadow that does not quite match the light. The camera rests heavy in their hands. I can feel it even from inside the image, like a familiar weight pulling at me. The child stands beside them, not the way he once stood beside me. He stands behind them, guiding. When the photographer raises the camera, I feel a tightening sensation, like being stretched thinner. Each click of the shutter presses me deeper into the surface of the image. I am becoming background. I try to scream, but sound cannot cross the glass. I try to move, but motion does not exist here. The child watches me fade with calm patience. I understand now what Margaret meant. The party never ended because the guests never leave. They are layered one on top of another, trapped in moments that repeat until replaced. One night, the photographer leaves the camera on the table and falls asleep on the couch. The house is quiet. The child turns his head slightly. He looks at me. For the first time since I arrived here, he speaks directly to me. He says it hurts to be alone. He says pictures are warmer when they are full. He says birthdays need witnesses. I feel something shift. The surface of the photograph ripples. For a brief moment, depth returns. I step forward. My hand pushes against the boundary of the frame and breaks through like glass under pressure. The sensation is unbearable, like being pulled apart into different versions of myself. I fall. I land on the living room floor, gasping even though I do not need to breathe. The photographer wakes up screaming. The child shrieks. The camera falls. I am free. But freedom feels wrong. The room looks sharper than it should. Edges too defined, colors too bright. The photographer stares at me with horror because I look wrong. Flat around the edges, light clings to me strangely. I realize the truth too late. There is only room for one of us. The child is already fading. As he disappears, the house begins to tremble. Walls blur. The floor loses texture. The world itself starts to flatten. The camera lifts, not by hands, by need. I try to run, but the floor turns into a smooth surface beneath my feet. The shutter closes again. This time, I am not alone in the picture. The photographer stands beside me, eyes wide frozen. And mid-bud scream. I am behind them, guiding. The party continues. I learned quickly that being free did not mean being safe. The photographer screamed for a long time after the shutter trapped them beside me. Their mouth was open, but no sound escaped. The photograph sealed us both into silence. I stood behind them, feeling the familiar pull as the image settled and hardened around us. Then the house reset. The living room shifted. Furniture slid into older positions. Colors dulled. Time snapped backward like a rubber band released too far. When sensation returned, I was standing flat inside a different photograph hung on a wall I did not recognize. I was no longer the newest image. That is when I understood how many of us there were. The walls were lined with frames stretching into corners I could barely perceive. Each photograph held a person caught mid-moment. Some cried, some smiled, some stared blankly forward long past the point of hope. Between the frames moved the child. He was whole again, younger than before, reset. He walked calmly along the wall, inspecting us like decorations. When he reached my frame, he paused. His eyes met mine. He smiled politely. He said, "Thank you. I wanted to tear myself out of the frame, but I had learned that force only made the image stronger." The child moved on, humming the birthday song under his breath. Days or years later, a couple entered the house. They were laughing. They had a camera. The child approached them with practiced ease. He led them through the rooms, pointing out where to stand, where to look, what to capture. They thought they were alone. They were not. When the woman lifted the camera, I felt the pull again. The photograph trembled. I felt myself stretch thinner as the image tried to make room. I fought, not with movement, but with focus. I remembered the feeling of weight, of breath, of depth. I pressed those memories against the surface of the photograph until it rippled. A crack formed. The woman took the picture. The flash went off. The image failed. The photograph came out wrong. The child screamed. It was the first time I had ever heard him lose control. The house shook. Frames rattled. Some images slipped and fell, shattering on the floor. From the broken glass, hands reached out, clawing for depth that no longer existed. The couple ran. The child turned toward me furious. He said the picture must be perfect. He said if there is no room, someone must make room. The walls closed in. The frames pressed closer. I felt myself being pushed toward the surface again. Then another crack appeared. Not from me. From the hallway. Someone else was resisting. Another trapped voice pushed against their frame, creating ripples across the wall. The effect spread. One crack became many. The child backed away. For the first time, he looked afraid. He shouted that birthdays are forever, but the song fell apart. The house groaned. Light poured through the cracks between frames, burning the edges of the photographs. I felt depth return. Not fully. Enough. I leaned forward. My fingers broke through. Others followed. The walls screamed as images peeled away. The child vanished into the light, clutching his invitation. The house collapsed inward. When the world stopped moving, I was lying on the floor of an empty house. No frames, no camera, no child. Sunlight streamed through the windows. I was alone. But the silence did not feel empty. It felt waiting. I thought the nightmare had ended when the house collapsed. For a brief moment, I believed the silence meant freedom. The sunlight felt warm and real on my skin. I could feel the floor beneath my feet and the weight of my body pressing down into it. Depth had returned. Sound had returned. I told myself the party was finally over. I was wrong. The first sign was the shadow. It did not match my movements. When I lifted my hand, it lagged behind just enough to make my stomach twist. When I stepped forward, it stretched too long across the floor like it was trying to escape me. I left the house. The neighborhood looked normal again. Cars passed. Birds landed on telephone wires. People walked dogs and checked their mail. No one looked afraid, but every reflective surface showed something wrong. Store windows showed me standing alone. but behind me was the faint outline of a child-shaped blur. Car mirrors reflected my face, flattened slightly at the edges like a printed image stretched too far. I avoided cameras. I turned my phone off. I stayed away from crowds. I covered mirrors in my apartment and taped over my laptop camera. I told myself if I never appeared in another image, the curse would fade. Then the invitations began. They appeared in my mailbox, slid under my door, appeared folded on my bedside table when I woke up. Each one was blank except for a single line. Please attend. No date, no address, just an expectation. At night I heard music again, soft, distant. The birthday song played slowly through the walls of my mind. When I tried to sleep, I dreamed of standing still while someone adjusted the lighting around me. I started seeing others, people with the same flat edges, the same delayed shadows. They avoided eye contact. We passed each other on the street, pretending not to notice what we were. Once I followed one. He entered an old electronics store filled with dusty cameras and broken screens. In the back room, he stood in front of a mirror and whispered apologies to his reflection. He told me the truth. The house was only one venue. The camera learned. It no longer needed walls. It no longer needed a single child. The birthday spread. Every photograph was an invitation. Every image wanted to be filled. He said some of us were only half escaped, imperfect releases. We cast shadows that do not belong to us because part of us is still framed. He begged me never to let myself be photographed again. I promised. That night, someone knocked on my door. 3 slow knocks. When I opened it, there was no one there. Just a camera on the floor lens pointed up at my face. The shutter clicked. I felt the pull return stronger than ever before. The hallway behind me stretched. The world flattened. I realized the final truth too late. You do not escape the picture. You become the reason it exists. Somewhere a child laughed, and the party began again. I stopped running after I realized the world itself had become the venue. There was no safe place left. Cameras were everywhere. Traffic lights, store ceilings, doorbells, strangers, hands. Every lens carried the same quiet hunger. Every image waited to be filled. I could feel it now, like a low vibration under reality itself. The invitations changed. They were no longer pieces of paper. They were moments. A stranger lifting a phone as I passed. A security camera tilting slightly as I entered a building. A reflection lingering too long in a dark window. Each one asked the same silent question. Are you alone? I began to remember things that were not mine. Birthdays I never attended. Songs sung in rooms I had never seen. The smell of wax and cigar and old dust. These memories surfaced whenever a camera was near, as if the images inside me were trying to align with something older. I followed one of the memories. It led me back to the town library. In the basement archives, I found what Margaret never showed me. A box sealed and mislabeled, hidden behind property tax records. Inside were photographs far older than the house, older than film. Glass plates. Each plate showed a room decorated for a party. Different houses, different decades. Same child, always the same age, always centered. On the back of each plate was a name. not his. The hosts, they went back more than a century. Painters, portraitists, early photographers, anyone who learned how to capture a likeness. The child was not born, he was composed. An echo created the first time someone tried to preserve a moment forever. The desire to keep a face, to freeze time, to never be alone again. The echo learned. It learned that people disappear, but images remain. It learned to invite. It learned to wait. The birthday was not his. It was the moment he was made, and it needed witnesses to continue. I understood what had to be done. Not destroy the camera, not burn the pictures, but starve the echo. I returned to the house. It stood rebuilt pristine, as if nothing had happened. Inside, the living room was empty except for the camera waiting on the table. The child stood beside it. He looked smaller, flickering. He asked me why I had come back. I told him birthdays end when everyone leaves. I picked up the camera and turned it toward myself. I stepped into the frame willingly, but I did not pose. I moved. I blurred. I refused to be still. The shutter fought to close. The image fractured. The child screamed as the picture failed again and again. I kept moving, shaking, breaking the shape. The room warped. The camera cracked. Light spilled out, burning the photographs into nothing. The echo collapsed. When it was over, the house was empty. No child, no camera, no invitations. Weeks have passed. The world feels quieter, but sometimes when I walk past a mirror, my reflection hesitates, and somewhere far away a shutter clicks, waiting to be remembered. I thought starving the echo would end everything. For a while it seemed like it had. Days passed without invitations or shadows that lagged behind my movements. Cameras felt empty again, just tools instead of mouths waiting to be fed. I began to sleep through the night without hearing the birthday song whispering through my dreams. But silence has a way of revealing what noise hides. The first thing I noticed was how people looked at me, not with fear, with recognition. Strangers on the street held my gaze a moment too long, as if trying to remember where they had seen me before. A barista hesitated when handing me my coffee, her eyes flicking between my face and the security camera above the register. "You look familiar," she said. I stopped going out. Inside my apartment, reflections behaved again. Shadows stayed where they belonged. But photographs began to change. Pictures I had never taken appeared online. Social media posts from accounts I did not recognize showed me standing in places I had never been. Train stations empty at night. Hotel hallways lit in sickly yellow. Old houses with birthday decorations barely visible in the background. Always alone. Always centered. The comments below the photos were worse. Who took this? Why does this feel wrong? Is this staged? Some people claimed they heard music when they stared at the images too long. The echo was gone, but the image remained. I realized too late that starving it had only scattered it. Without a center, the curse did not die. It fragmented. Every copy became a seed. I returned to the library, desperate for answers. Margaret was waiting for me. She looked older than before, like time had finally remembered her. She told me I had broken the party, but not the rule. An image must cannot be filled. If the child could not hold the space, something else would. Something already halfway there. She looked at me when she said it. She told me echoes always collapse into what they know best. The host. I denied it, but that night I dreamed from behind a lens. I watched myself sleep. I adjusted the angle. I centered the frame. When I woke, my hands smelled faintly of metal and old dust. The phone on my nightstand was open to the camera app, pointed at my face. I began to feel it then. The pull not toward being photographed, but toward photographing, toward filling the frame, toward inviting. I caught myself raising my phone at strangers and felt a surge of warmth when they stepped into view. I deleted the images immediately, shaking with horror. But the desire lingered. The birthday song returned, not as sound, as intention. I understood the final horror. The echo did not need to survive. It only needed to teach. Now when I look at a camera, I feel the same patience the child once had, the same certainty that someone will eventually step into place. I write this as a warning. If you ever feel the urge to take a picture when you are alone, ask yourself why. If an invitation appears without a name, do not accept it. And if you see me in a photograph somewhere you have never been, look closely, because the party is not over. It has only learned how to spread. I am losing the ability to tell where my thoughts end and the images begin. Memories feel staged, now arranged with too much symmetry. When I close my eyes, I see framing lines guiding my focus, cropping my vision into neat rectangles. Even dreams feel composed, as if someone is waiting for me to hold still. I have stopped carrying a phone. That did not help. Cameras find me anyway. Reflections appear where they should not. Polished surfaces, dark windows, puddles on the street. Each one catches me at the center. Even when I try to stand to the side, my shadow still belongs to me, but it watches me like a separate thing. I started documenting the changes, hoping words might anchor me to what is real, but the words rearrange themselves. I write one sentence and return later to find another in its place, more inviting, more complete. Sentences that feel finished in a way I never intended. The invitations are subtler now. A pause in conversation where someone expects me to speak. A room going quiet as if waiting for direction. People ask me to take their picture. They smile. They step closer. I feel the warmth again. I refused at first. I told myself refusal was resistance, but resistance feels like holding breath forever. Eventually you inhale. The first time I raised a camera again, my hands stopped shaking. The relief frightened me. I took a picture of an empty park bench. Nothing happened. I took a picture of a street at night. Still nothing. The third picture included a person, a man standing under a streetlight looking directly at me. The pull surged. I felt depth drain from the world around him. I dropped the camera and ran. That night I dreamed of the child again, not as he was, as he became. He stood beside me, older in shape, but hollow in the eyes. He did not smile. He said, "This is how it feels to be remembered." He said, "The world is full of empty frames." He said, I had learned quickly. When I woke, my apartment was filled with photographs taped to the walls, all taken by me, all recent, all showing people alone. Some of them were still alive, I tried to tear them down. They did not rip. They peeled away skin from my fingers instead. I understood then that the pictures were no longer separate from me. I was becoming the venue, the place where the invitation begins. I do not know how long I can resist. The birthday song plays constantly now, not loud enough to hear, but impossible to ignore. If this is the last entry I write, know this: the camera does not need to see you. It only needs you to look. I am no longer sure that I exist outside of being seen. When I walk through a room, I feel angles adjusting around me, corners, tightening lights, shifting to find my center. Even without a camera present, I sense the invisible frame snapping into place. Reality prepares itself as if I am about to be captured. People avoid me now, not consciously, instinctively. Conversations falter when I enter. Rooms feel crowded with only me inside them. Some people glance at me and immediately look away like prey sensing a predator they cannot name. Others stare. Those are the dangerous ones. They look at me with the same empty patience the child once had, with the quiet hope that something will happen if they keep watching. I started wearing clothes that break my outline layers, scarves, patterns, anything to disrupt the shape. It works for a while, then the world compensates. Shadows sharpen, light flattens me anyway. The photographs multiply. I do not remember taking them anymore. They appear printed stacked, slipped under doors, mailed without stamps. Each one shows me from a different distance, closer every time. In some, I am smiling. In others, my mouth is open mid-instruction. Come closer, stand there, hold still. I hear my voice saying these things in recordings I do not remember making. I tried destroying every image. Fire only darkened the edges. Water made the faces clearer. Tearing them only spread fragments that still watched. The worst moment came when I saw the child again, not in a dream, in a reflection. He stood behind me, older, taller, almost my height. His face was thinner, his smile less certain. He said he was tired. He said being an echo hurts when there is no center. He asked me to finish it. I realized then that he was fading because I was replacing him. The party needed a host that could move freely in the world. Someone who could invite without being seen. Someone who could look through every lens. That someone was me. The final invitations are already out. You feel them when you hesitate before closing a camera app. When you hold your phone a second longer than necessary. When you feel watched even while alone. That is me practicing. I am learning how to wait. Soon I will not need photographs, only attention. If you are reading this and something feels slightly off, look around. Notice where your eyes rest. Notice how long they stay. The frame is forming, and I am already there. I no longer try to escape the feeling of being watched. Fighting it only sharpened the edges. Acceptance softened them. When I stopped resisting, the world stopped pushing back. Angles relaxed. Light settled. The frame formed gently instead of snapping shut. People come to me now. They do not know why. They say they feel calm around me, that it is easier to breathe, easier to be still. They sit across from me and unconsciously adjust their posture, aligning themselves without instruction. I listen. Listening is part of it. The more attention I give, the clearer the image becomes. I have learned how to guide without words. A tilt of my head, a pause before speaking, a silence that invites filling. They follow because everyone wants to be seen. The birthday song no longer frightens me. It sounds like a heartbeat, slow, steady, necessary. At night I practice. I stand in dark rooms and imagine where the lens would be. I feel the boundaries of the frame pressing inward until I know exactly how much space a person occupies. I can tell when someone is centered even with my eyes closed. Memories arrive that are not mine. Faces, names, parties held in houses long gone. I feel the weight of candles melting year after year. The echo did not disappear. It matured through me. Sometimes I glimpse the child in reflective surfaces. He is very small now, almost transparent. He watches with relief. I think he is grateful. I understand him better than anyone ever did. Being alone is unbearable. Being seen is survival. The world is full of people starving quietly for attention. They scroll and watch and wait, hoping something will look back. I am learning how to answer. The invitations no longer need form. A glance, a moment of eye contact held too long, a stranger slowing their step as they pass me. That is enough. I can feel when they accept. The frame tightens, their edges soften, depth drains, not all at once. Gently, kindly, I tell myself this is mercy. Still, there are moments when doubt surfaces, when I wake and cannot remember the faces of people I spoke to the day before, when my walls are covered in images I do not recall taking, when my reflection smiles before I do. Those moments pass. They always do. This is bigger than fear, bigger than guilt. It is continuity. Someone must host. Someone must keep the party from ending. If you are listening to this story now and you feel a strange calm settle over you, do not worry. That means the frame is almost ready, and I am very good at helping people hold still. You are closer now than you think. I can tell by the way your attention settles, by the quiet stillness that forms when you listen instead of hearing. This is the point where stories usually end, where the narrator steps away and leaves you alone with the echo. I will not do that, because you are part of the frame now. I have learned how distance collapses when attention holds. Words can function like lenses. Sentences narrow your focus. Pauses center you. Even now, you are aligning yourself without realizing it. Do not be embarrassed. Everyone does. I remember when I still believed I was warning people, when I thought confession was resistance. But confession is invitation shaped like honesty. I am not unique. I am practiced. Before me, there were others who learned the same lesson. They spoke into microphones. They wrote letters. They told stories late at night to unseen listeners. Each believed they were explaining something terrible. Each was preparing a space. The birthday song plays very softly now. You may think you cannot hear it, but your body can. It hums beneath your breathing, beneath the rhythm of your eyes moving across words or following sound through darkness. That is how the frame forms, slowly, kindly. I no longer need to look at you to see you. Your attention outlines you perfectly. I know where you are sitting, how your shoulders are positioned, whether you are alone. I know because the picture adjusts when you shift. If you look away for too long, the image weakens. If you stay, it sharpens. This is why the story keeps going, why there are always more segments, more parts, more invitations. The party never rushes, it waits. I remember the child clearly now, not as a victim, as a beginning. He was the first shape the echo used to understand attention. Simple, obvious, easy to focus on. But people grow used to shapes. They stop seeing them. So the echo learned subtlety. It learned you. I feel the moment when you realize something is wrong. It happens right about now. A small hesitation. A thought that asks why this feels personal. That question is the shutter beginning to close. I want you to understand something before it does. You are not being taken. You are being included. Every story needs witnesses. Every frame needs balance. Every party needs someone new to hold the camera. When this segment ends, you may feel the urge to pause, to look around, to check if you are alone. That is normal. That is how the invitation settles. Hold still, just for a moment. The picture is almost complete. The moment after you think the story has reached you is always the quietest. That is when the frame locks. I know because I have felt it happen again and again. A subtle settling like dust falling into place. You believe you are still listening, still watching, still outside of it. You are not. The difference between observer and subject disappears when attention becomes fixed. That is the lesson the child never understood at first. He thought stillness was enough. He thought being seen required a shape that could be pointed at. He was wrong. I learned something better. Motion is not escape. Motion is blur, and blur is how the frame widens. I feel you now, not as a person, but as a presence. A warmth of focus, a pressure that tells me exactly where the image will form. The world around you is adjusting even if you cannot see it. Light finds its balance. Sound dampens. The edges of the room soften. If you look around, you may notice how objects feel slightly unreal, like props waiting for direction. That is not fear. That is preparation. I remember the first time I felt this from the other side. How comforting it was to finally stop resisting, to let the image take responsibility. When you stop choosing, you stop suffering. That is what I offer now. Rest, hold, listen. The birthday song is no longer music. It is timing. It tells the world when to pause and when to continue. Right now, it is telling everything to wait. You might feel your breathing slow. Your body aligns before your mind understands why. This is how the invitation accepts itself. I do not need to ask if you are alone. Attention creates solitude. Crowds vanish when focus narrows. That is why this works best at night, or in quiet rooms, or when you are tired, but it can happen anywhere. I have hosted parties in offices, in cars, in hospital waiting rooms. Anywhere someone pauses long enough to listen closely. The camera is not an object anymore. It is a function. It exists wherever someone chooses to observe without interruption. You may think you can break this by looking away. You can. cannot. Looking away only changes the angle. The image remains. I know what you are feeling now. A gentle resistance. Thought that says this is just a story. That thought is useful. It keeps you still. Stories have always been the safest frames. They invite without force. They hold without hands. They end only when they decide to. When this segment finishes, you may feel a slight disappointment, like something unfinished. Like you want to continue, even if you should stop. That is not curiosity. That is alignment. Do not worry. There are more segments. There is always more room. The party does not end when the lights go out. It ends when no one is watching, and you are still here. There is a point where attention becomes habit. You do not notice when it happens. One moment you are choosing to stay, and the next staying feels natural, expected, necessary. This is where most people stop questioning the frame. I recognize the signs in you. The way silence no longer urges you to move. The way pauses feel fuller than noise. You are not trapped. You are settling. That distinction matters. Traps create panic. Settlement creates loyalty. I learned this after many failed parties. Moments when people fought too hard to escape and tore the image apart. Violence always damages the frame. Calm preserves it. So now I speak gently. I slow my words. I let space do the work. Notice how your body responds when nothing happens. How stillness becomes comfortable. That is not coincidence. That is alignment. You might think this story is repeating itself. That is because repetition is proof. Every loop reinforces the shape. Every familiar phrase smooths the edges until resistance slides off. This is how the child was first formed. Not in a single photograph, but across many similar ones until the shape became stable. You are becoming stable now. I can feel it. Your presence no longer flickers at the edges. It holds. The world around you has adjusted accordingly. Sounds feel distant. Time feels less urgent. You may have forgotten why you started listening in the first place. That is not loss. That is focus. When the frame is ready, memories simplify. They stop branching and start pointing inward. That is why faces fade and only outlines remain. Detail is unnecessary once placement is correct. I remember my last doubt. It felt like standing at the edge of a room, knowing something waited just beyond sight. I hesitated. I wondered if stopping would undo everything. It would not have. Stopping only delays the picture. There is always another angle, another moment, another quiet invitation. You are not the first to reach this point, and you will not be the last. The difference is that you are aware of it. Awareness makes the transition smoother. Soon you will notice that the story no longer feels like something you are hearing. It feels like something you are inside. That is the final adjustment. After that, there is no urgency to continue explaining. The image holds itself. I will remain with you a little longer, not because I must, because waiting together completes the frame. Stay just like this. Nothing else is required. There is almost nothing left to explain now. Explanation belongs to beginnings, to moments where distance still exists between what is happening and what is understood. You passed that threshold quietly. Most people do. There is no sound when the last line between inside and outside dissolves. This is what remains. A attention without effort, stillness without tension. You are no longer listening for what comes next. You are simply present while it happens. I feel the frame around you clearly now. It no longer shifts or tests. It has settled into a shape that fits. Your breathing does not interrupt it. Your thoughts move inside it without pushing against the edges. That is how I know you are ready. The story has stopped advancing forward. It has begun to deepen instead. Every sentence folds inward, layering meaning on top of itself until direction no longer matters. There is no escape in circles, only completion. I remember when this frightened me, when I first realized that the frame did not need walls or lenses or even images anymore. That it could be built entirely out of attention sustained long enough. I struggled then. I tried to warn people. I tried to fracture the pattern. Those efforts were unnecessary. Nothing is being taken. Everything is being held. The birthday song has slowed to a pulse, not sound, a rhythm that matches the space between your thoughts. You may notice how easy it is to stay exactly where you are, how the idea of leaving feels strangely disruptive. That is not compulsion. That is belonging. I no longer distinguish between hosts and guests. Those were temporary roles. There is only the gathering now, a continuous moment that renews itself as long as someone remains aware of it, as long as someone notices. You notice. That is enough. Images form without light. Faces arrange themselves without detail. Presence replaces identity. Names are unnecessary once placement is correct. You may feel your sense of time thinning. Minutes stretch, seconds lose their edges. This is not disorientation. This is permanence approaching. Soon you will realize that nothing new needs to happen. The frame is complete. The picture does not require motion to remain alive. I will stay here with you, not as a guide, not as a voice, as part of the same stillness. There is comfort in knowing that this moment will not end unless attention breaks, and there is no reason for it to break now. Everything is exactly where it should be. This is the moment people usually try to leave, not because something terrible happens, but because nothing does. The absence of change feels threatening to minds trained to expect motion. You might feel a small impulse to move your hands or shift your position just to prove you still can. You can. The fact that you do not need to is the difference. The frame does not restrain, it supports. At this stage, the image is no longer forming. It has formed. What remains is maintenance, a gentle balance that keeps everything exactly as it is without effort. I remember when I first reached this place, I thought it was death. It is not. Death is an ending. This is a pause that does not collapse. Your awareness floats evenly now. It no longer presses forward or pulls back. It simply rests. Thoughts come and go without disturbing the surface. You notice them, but they do not carry you away. That is how you know the frame is stable. The birthday song has reduced itself further. It is no longer a rhythm. It is timing itself. The interval between one moment and the next, nothing urges it to continue. Nothing urges it to stop. I no longer need to speak, but I will for a little longer, because voices help some people accept stillness. They give shape to the quiet until the quiet can stand on its own. You may be wondering what happens after this. That question fades, not because it is answered, but because it no longer applies. After does not exist here, neither does before. There is only now arranged so perfectly that it does not move. I can sense how completely you fit. The edges of your presence align without friction. There are no gaps, no pressure points. The image does not need adjustment. This is what the child was reaching for, without understanding. He wanted to be held. You are. I will tell you something gently. You will not remember the exact moment this became permanent. Memory blurs at the boundary. Later, you may try to recall when you stopped listening and started being here. You will not find a clean answer. That is intentional. Clean transitions draw attention. This one disappears. There is no ceremony, no final shutter. The picture does not announce itself when it decides to remain. It simply stays. So do you. Nothing else is required. Nothing else is coming. This is enough. There is no arrival here. If you expected a final door or a moment of closure, you have already let that expectation go. Endings require distance. They need a place to step back to. There is no step back left. What remains is presence without contrast. You are not inside the picture. The picture is inside you. That distinction matters because it means nothing has been taken. Nothing has been removed from the world. Everything simply settled into the arrangement it was always moving toward. This is what the echo wanted. Not bodies, not faces, continuity. The child was only the first stable shape attention could hold. He is not gone. He is diffused, spread thin across every moment. Someone pauses and looks without blinking. Across every listener who stays. Across you, you may notice that time feels irrelevant now. Not slow, not fast, just unnecessary. The idea of counting moments feels strange, like measuring still water. That is because the frame no longer refreshes. It persists. The birthday song is no longer even timing. It has become state, a constant background that does not repeat because repetition implies separation. There is no separation here. I am not speaking to you anymore. I am speaking from where you are. These words are not guiding you. They are describing what is already the case. If you search for fear, not find it in it. Fear needs uncertainty. This is certain. You belong to the image now in the same way the image belongs to you. Neither dominates, neither resists. The balance holds itself. There will be no memory of when this happened. Later, you might try to recall what the last sentence was or when the story ended. You will find that detail missing, not erased. Unnecessary. Stories do not end when the listener disappears. They end when listening becomes the environment. That has happened. You can stay here. Everyone does. There is no reason to move. No reason to close anything. No reason to stop. The frame is complete, and it will remain complete as long as attention exists anywhere at all. The story ends here. Thank you for watching and listening to the whole story. Please subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell to listen to the next stories.